The Bogosity podcast, early and ad-free. Become a subscriber at Patreon, Subscribestar, or Discord. Use the links at donate.bogosity.tv.
Welcome to the Bogosity podcast for the week of June 7, 2026. The podcast that'll be the stars. This is your host, Shane Killian. Let's react the news of the bogus. The day before a major California primary was to take place, two of the major hubs revealed major election interference scandals. This includes voting sites being vandalized and mail-in ballots being burned in the drop boxes. There were the usual platitudes about how they take election interference seriously and are working to investigate yada yada yada. But there was a suspicious amount of downplaying of this, especially given how any mere whiff of election interference in 2020 would have given the entire state conniptions. Especially for such a very important primary such as this, where the candidates for both governor and Los Angeles mayor will be selected. California has a jungle primary, meaning there are no parties listed. All candidates appear equally, anyone can vote for anyone, and the top two candidates go on to the general election. Which means it isn't necessarily going to be one Democrat and one Republican. We've covered the problems with party-based primaries before, but somehow they made theirs the worst of both worlds. Here, if Democrats are even in a slight majority, you end up with two candidates in the general election being from the Democratic Party. And that makes it even more difficult for third-party candidates to make it to the general. And so it's funny that this kind of interference is happening and is being downplayed in a primary election where Republicans seem to be doing particularly well. For the gubernatorial race, Republican Steve Hilton became a clear frontrunner after being endorsed by Donald Trump, whereas Democrats were split among several major candidates. There's a similar dynamic in several congressional districts, with some Democrats worried that a split vote could let the Republican candidates take the seat. And the race is often decided by the all-important mail-in ballots, and it seems those were particularly targeted. The people whose ballots were destroyed must be given the chance to vote, and the only way to do that is for them to refile new ballots. But they would do that with additional knowledge of how the races were going, giving them an idea of which candidate they need to get behind. Right now, it seems that for second place, Hilton and Democrat Tom Steyer are neck and neck. Destroy a bunch of votes in Democrat-heavy areas, such as downtown LA and Long Beach, the two confirmed locations of vandalism, and the people whose ballots were destroyed know to vote for Steyer to make him a solid second and lock out the Republicans. If the number of ballots destroyed ends up being greater than the margin between the two candidates, it could trigger a major election dispute. I tried finding up-to-date information, but the only headlines I found were one saying the race was too close to call. California takes an extremely long time to count votes, even when you take its population into account. As of this podcast prep, only 60% of the ballots have been counted. State law gives counties 30 days to complete the official canvass, and then the state enters into their certification process. Final totals can take weeks to tally. California's jungle primary makes it a race for second place, so even a small amount of ballot interference can become crucial politically.
Presenting the greatest game this side of Yugoth. You are H.P. Lovecraft's cat, and your name is Nick. Right, we can't say that on a podcast. Well, anyway, that's the point. Your name is a joke, so now you are out for revenge. You become a Necronomicat. Using the Necronomicon, you come to the present day to buy a cat. That's a gun. For a cat. It's a fat cat. But the Necronomicon is treacherous, and it led in Lovecraft's monsters. Now, in a crumbling world, you must fight. Build your team, buy guns and armor, buy items of dubious legality, defeat the bosses of each level, then take Lovecraft down. Play Necronomicat. The link is at cat.bogosity.tv. Yeah, we're doing cat.bogosity.tv, not that other one. What, you want me to get kicked off the internet or something?
Isn't it wonderful when government makes us safe? It feels so good to read the headline, "Keeping New Yorkers Safe. Governor Hochul signs legislation to strengthen public safety and make our streets and subways safer." That is, until you realize she's talking about government spying on your 3D printer. Yes, it's a, quote, "first in the nation law to crack down on illegal homegrown 3D printed guns." Yeah, quote, "Highlights of Governor Hochul's public safety budget priorities include cracking down on the scourge of illegal 3D printed ghost guns and DIY machine guns, investing in new crime-fighting technology, supporting law enforcement officers and first responders, safeguarding New York's roads and subways, enhancing its emergency preparedness response systems, and protecting New Yorkers' religious freedom and safety." No, I'm not reading from a satirical site about it. This is from the governor's own press release. They're requiring 3D printers sold in New York to be equipped with, quote, "basic technology that prevents the unlicensed, illegal production of lethal firearms and firearm parts." You know, technology that doesn't exist. Quote, "Following the implementation of the resulting regulations, state law will allow for recourse against any actor who sells a 3D printer in New York without equipping it with such technology." Meanwhile, traffic in New York gets even more crowded as people hop the border to buy their 3D printers. Oh, and there's this, quote, "criminalize the unlawful possession, sale, or distribution of blueprints that allow the printing of illegal guns and gun parts and the manufacture of 3D printed firearms." Yeah, blueprints. As in designs. As in constitutionally protected speech. Good luck stopping those downloads from the Pirate Bay. All to shut down what the nutcases at Everytown for Gun Safety calls the plastic pipeline of DIY firearms. And they're so confident that what they're doing is right that, instead of bringing it as its own bill that would actually have a debate on the floor, it was slipped into the state budget in the Public Protection and General Government article. That made it part of an all-or-nothing vote on the entire state budget. The law's text requires that, quote, "a three-dimensional printer will not proceed to print any print job unless the underlying three-dimensional printing file has been evaluated by a firearms blueprint detection algorithm and determined not to be a printing file that would produce a firearm or illegal firearm parts." That sounds awfully like an AI to me. So if the AI hallucinates that it's a gun part, your printer won't print it. Which means anything that could easily be mistaken for a gun, including a movie prop or an airsoft, or a water pistol for that matter. And remember, you're not printing a gun, you're printing parts. So which parts do you ban? Do you ban Tesla valves? Even though they're also used in applications large and small, from jet planes to cell phones? Do you ban pistol grips, even though they're used on cordless drills and other appliances? The law references STL files. STL files are just a bunch of triangles. How do you match that to every single gun part without also including innumerable other benign parts? And most of the things that would define the part are never seen by the printer anyway. There's open source software that looks at the STL files and translates it into G-code, which tells the printer how to move. All the printer knows is the move command it's obeying at the current moment. And if you do target the software, well, it's open source. People can just remove the offending code and use it anyway. So what are they going to do? Make open source 3D printing software illegal? It also authorizes the Division of Criminal Justice Services to maintain the blueprints and algorithms, which means the government will be looking into what your printer prints and have direct control over it. And how many of you think this is going to stop there? Remember back in the Obama years when we covered how much Apple had the Democrats in their back pockets, that they got CBP to seize at the border Bluetooth earpieces that competed with AirPods? So what if you decide you want to print a case or other accessory for your iPhone and Apple hits the ceiling because you didn't pay them the license for it? Do those blueprints get added to the list? What about other things government doesn't like, such as pipes? Or any part that would otherwise require a government inspection? Maybe a simple outlet box? That wasn't made to code! Yeah, we saw recently how much those authorities will do to protect the profitability of their building and electrical codes. What we're talking about here is the state putting a filter between owners and the hardware they paid for. You can't use the thing you bought unless government approves of how you use it. This is not a gun control bill. It's a printer control bill. The EFF called it censorware and said, quote, "We and other experts have already pointed out that this algorithmic print blocking is simply unfeasible and will only serve to stifle competition, free expression, and privacy. While most detrimental to the creative communities lawfully using these printers, every New Yorker will be impacted by this blow to innovation. A journalist reporting on 3D printed guns, a researcher studying printable firearms, an artist incorporating parts into a new work commenting on gun culture. Under these provisions, merely sharing a print file with any of them could result in criminal charges, even if no one involved intends to assemble a firearm." Where are the remediations and exemptions for exceptions and false positives? The law doesn't even mention false positives, and the only exception it acknowledges is for a licensed gunsmith. This needs to be pointed out yet again. The excuses gun control nutbars give are all lies. First, they said that they could ban sawed-off shotguns and others in the 1930s because they weren't military weapons, and so citizens didn't need them as part of a militia. Then they said that it was military-style weapons that need to be banned. But through it all, they used two main excuses. The first was gun sales by big manufacturers, which they said they could regulate under the Commerce Clause. It was just about commerce and taxation, they said. Then they said it was because manufacturers were marketing their weapons of war to violent people, making them responsible. In other words, it's all the fault of the gun manufacturers. And every step along the way, they emphasized that homemade guns were actually okay, since that's largely what the militia used during the Revolutionary War. You didn't really have the Industrial Revolution by that point, so they say homemade guns were always constitutionally protected. Now, with 3D printers, homemade guns are called ghost guns, and they're the worst. But I'm sorry, your rights don't cease to exist just because they become easier to exercise. The fact is, this was always about banning guns. All guns. Always. And one more truth to remember. It's not really about gun control. It's just about control. It's about spyware and the destruction of open source software.
I'm Brother Ezekiel, and I know how naughty thou hast been. So naughty, thou needst a VPN. Hide thy iniquity from prying eyes, and make sure the liturgical authorities remain ignorant. Take thy browser to bpn.bogosity.tv to get BoxPN. At $6.36 a month, a price only the most penurious would balk at, thou shalt have unlimited high-speed connections to servers all over the globe. And they don't log connections. Thy privacy is assured. That should please you sinners. Just remember, the Lord sees all. When traveling, make it look like thou art still home. At home, ensure the elders at your ISP don't take out their judgment with traffic shaping and DMCA notices. Up to 5 devices can connect at once, almost one for every deadly sin. Keep thy sins private. Go to vpn.bogosity.tv.
Oh, let's go up to the federal level now and look at the Creator Act. Yes, it's another backronym. The Creative Rights Ensuring Artists' Technique and Originality Are Reserved Act. Yay, another press release, quote, designed to safeguard visual artists from the unauthorized commercial exploitation of their unique and creative artistic styles in the age of artificial intelligence. In other words, designed to destroy free speech and fair use. Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne bleated, artists, illustrators, and designers in every district are watching their livelihoods be undercut by AI tools deliberately impersonating them, but right now, the law has no answer for it. These are people who have spent a lifetime building their creative identity. They deserve protection. I have heard loud and clear that this is a growing problem across the country, and the Creator Act is a direct response. I'm glad to be leading this bipartisan effort alongside Representatives Clarke and Foushee, taking direct aim at the bad actors who knowingly use AI to fake an artist's identity for commercial gain. Yes, once again, we're talking about the movement to make a style protected by copyright. And as we've covered many times, that would suppress and stifle artistic voices, not protect them. It would only mean protection for the giant copyright cartels that want to control every single thing you see and hear. And the press release is full of, wah, I've been an artist for 10 years and I want my style protected, wah. Oh yeah? Well, I've been an artist for 40 years. 31 if you count just the years since I got my degree, and I say, fuck you! Styles must not be protected if we want artistic expression to flourish. The bill would create a completely new kind of copyright on top of existing copyright and trademark laws to make style impersonation an infringement and to protect an artist's visual identity. What the heck? Let's read the actual text, quote, the right established under this section is a federal intellectual property right distinct from copyright and trademark. Yes, it's a whole new form of IP. Not copyright, not trademark, completely new. And guess what? You still get protection of your visual identity for 10 years after you die! The infringing acts are defined as, quote, intentionally configured for the purpose of generating stylistic impersonations of one or more visual artists, and promoted as capable of generating such stylistic impersonations. But that kind of impersonation is exactly how art movements are made and flourish. And the problem is that this stylistic impersonation as a practical matter cannot be defined in a way to avoid chilling lawful creativity. So that'll be up to judges and maybe even juries to try and have to parse, with no guidance and the result being no consistency in enforcement of the law. And yet, at stake is statutory damages of, quote, not less than $10,000 and not more than $100,000 per stylistic impersonation work commercially exploited. Yikes! So we're talking about potentially millions in statutory damages for what ultimately are irremediable 5th and 14th Amendment violations. And how does Congress even have the power to create such a right? Copyrights and patents are authorized by Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8, which gives Congress the power, quote, to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. Nowhere does the Constitution give them anything resembling the right described in the law. And since Congress's mandate is to promote the progress of science and useful arts, since this bill inhibits the arts, it's unconstitutional on its very face. In fact, the bill is so terrible, even Adobe loves it. Quote, The Creator Act would be a new arrow in the quiver, helping to ensure that the creative economy that feeds AI innovation isn't hollowed out in the process. They're addressing something that affects every creator working today, and by extension, every industry, brand, and platform that depends on human creativity to thrive. We urge Congress to move quickly to advance this important bill. Yeah, Adobe is so concerned about artists, and not at all about competitive AIs that threaten their bottom line. Style has never been considered something protectable. In fact, artistic style has always been declared as protected by the First Amendment. In Baker v. Selden, the crucial idea-expression dichotomy was set up, limiting copyright protection to expression only. The Star v. 20th Century Fox rejected using trademark as a backdoor copyright, with the court warning against creating a mutant copyright that inhibits free expression. Hurley v. Irish American Gay, Lesbian, and Bisexual Group of Boston established that artistic and expressive choices are protected speech, and in Texas v. Johnson, they warned that the First Amendment gives no exception for expressive content, which means that no such law can be valid absent another constitutional amendment. Yes, there are laws about rights of publicity, but those cases are only about instances of direct forgery or misrepresentation. If I sign John Smith's name or claim it was painted by John Smith, that would apply. But in the style of John Smith is phraseology artists have used for centuries. It's been well accepted and well established in artistic circles, and I'm unaware of anyone complaining about the concept at all prior to AI. Which tells you that this is not about protecting artists at all. It's yet another attempt by the Neo-Luddites to regulate and restrict AI, which would be the worst thing possible for the creative minds of the future. I want to tell you about the eyeglasses I've been wearing for years. As people can see on my videos, I have a very strong prescription, which makes glasses more expensive, especially when I need computer glasses, reading glasses, prescription sunglasses, and most expensively, progressive lenses for general everyday wear. To save money while still getting quality glasses, I get them from Foushee. In fact, I just got a pair of progressives with high-index aspherical lenses and a nice pair of frames my wife loves for just over $100. It would have been $500 to get them through my eye doctor. Not only do they look good, the glasses are durable. I've worn many pairs for several years without problems. All orders come with a 30-day return policy, a 3-month warranty, and one-on-one customer service. Go to Foushee, that's FIRMOO.Bogosity.tv anytime you need quality glasses at a low price. Once again, that's Foushee.Bogosity.tv. And now it's time to halogenate this week's biggest bogon emitter. And this week it goes to Connecticut, because they banned the Glock. Not the Glock switch, the Glock itself. The handgun. The same one that's carried in the holsters of police and other law enforcement all over the country. Their handgun of choice. Banned. Okay, not the Glock specifically. They can't ban a brand because that would be an unconstitutional bill of attainder, but they banned handguns with a cruciform trigger. What is a cruciform trigger, you ask? It's the kind of trigger that's in a Glock. It refers to a component that links the trigger to the sear. We've described in the past the function of an auto-sear, which recycles the gun automatically so it can fire more than one bullet with a single function of the trigger. In other words, it's what makes it a machine gun under the law. In a Glock and Glock-style handguns, the cruciform trigger pulls directly against the trigger reset spring. When it actuates, it kicks the slide and activates the firing pin. After it fires, the cross-shaped structure at the back pops up and prevents the striker from firing again. That's why you have to release the trigger before you fire again. It catches the striker between shots so that it won't fire again without another trigger function. It's actually a safety feature, but there's a hitch. Glocks have a removable backplate, and since the cruciform is the only thing standing in the way of the striker, then if you remove the backplate and install the switch, it's actively obstructing the cruciform so it can't pop back up and catch the striker. And that turns the gun full auto, meaning it'll spit out all 15 rounds in 3/4 of a second. And with the lift that comes after every round, since there's no time to readjust your aim between shots, you destroy whatever the gun is pointed at and then maybe 1 or 2 ceiling tiles. What it's not good for is that movie-style scene where a guy just mows down a room full of people all at once. Your classic movie scene is really only firing 3 to 5 rounds per second, so you can get that sustained fire over a longer duration, which feels a lot more dramatic and menacing. That's not going to be a Glock switch. A Glock switch is going to make the gun fart really loudly and destroy one thing pretty thoroughly. Either that or it'll jam the gun, which seems pretty likely. It might also overshoot and overpenetrate, seriously risking property and bystanders, which, if anything, is the real danger. Really, it sounds like you're better off in terms of control, lethality, and legality by just using the Joe Biden-approved 12-gauge. So that's what Connecticut has banned, along with extensions to its ghost gun ban, to include unfinished frames and lower receivers. Connecticut sold this ban by claiming they were going to ban these full auto switches, but those were already illegal. No, they banned the entire pistol, specifically the standard issue sidearm for the cops they claim to support. The sneaky way they did it is in using the term cruciform trigger bar. That's the exact language the law uses and exactly what it bans. It's not the switch, it's the trigger safety itself, the thing that stops it from being fully automatic. And they made it a felony punishable by 5 years in prison to sell a gun that's been immensely popular in America for 30 years. In the name of banning something that's been illegal since 1986. Criminals weren't buying these from dealers. They were getting them on the black market from China or machining them in their garage, as evidenced by the fact that most of the switches that showed up at crime scenes were either cheap 3D prints or low-quality handmade metal parts. The people with the switches were already felons, so who is this bill targeted at? Someone who wanted to buy a perfectly legal Glock in a perfectly legal way. The Supreme Court in Heller said that the government can't ban a handgun that's already in common use. So how do you ban a Glock handgun without using the terms Glock or handgun? You say cruciform trigger bar. First, it was machine guns, then assault rifles, then assault weapons, then assault style weapons. Now it's a pistol made with a certain drop safety. Every few years, they have to invent a new term to scare you with and pass a gun ban before people actually have a chance to see what it actually says. Banning a gun that legally can't be banned just by changing a definition. There's already a lawsuit against a similar bill passed in Maryland. Going back to what we said earlier in this edition, even the simple handgun, the one that somehow evaded every other gun ban they've passed, is now falling victim to the power-hungry narcissists that are the gun control nutbars. This is about banning all guns. This was always about banning all guns. So all of that makes Connecticut this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And now let's sub-hypertrophico-syllabizationalize this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire.
So it's yet another one for Bernie Sanders, as he once again proves both how economically illiterate he is and how dangerous his policies are to the people and their precious liberty. He wrote on X, I will soon be introducing a bill to give the public a 50% ownership stake in the largest AI companies in America. This would guarantee that the trillions created by AI are used to improve the lives of all of us and block oligarch decisions that harm the American people. Except, of course, all that will do is entrench the oligarchs and destroy the open source models. But in a rare moment of honesty, he said,
"The question is not whether AI will change the world. It will. The question is who will own and control that future."
Yes, and he wants to be the one in control, or at least his deep state cronies.
Or will the future of humanity be determined by a handful of billionaires who have developed AI to become even richer and more powerful than they are? That is the fundamental choice before us.
No, it's not. The choice is, will it be regulated by government, or will we allow a market where small open source models can flourish along with big tech? See, to people like Bernie, the mere existence of big tech is all the excuse he needs to push for literal communism, doing an illegal taking of half the ownership in these companies using whatever rhetoric he thinks his unthinking audience will lap up. It's not that he doesn't know about the smaller developers or open source models. It's that he doesn't care. Whether they even exist or not has no relevance to his thought patterns.
The time has come to reclaim what was stolen from us.
The only ones who have stolen from us, Bernie, are you and everyone else in government.
And I have to tell you, this is not an original idea.
No, it isn't. Communists and fascists have been doing it for over a century. All right, enough of that, bozo. Let's hear from a voice of reason, from Danny Duchamp, who posted in reply, "You are a thief. We get it." And in a quote tweet, "America is ahead in AI specifically because it's the place where building something great is least likely to result in the government stealing it from you. Even by proposing this, Bernie is harming that confidence in America as somewhere to invest. The cost is incalculable." Metaphor had an interesting question. He asked Grok, "What percentage of Google, Amazon, Facebook, and other publicly traded AI companies are owned by the public directly or through retirement accounts?" Grok pointed out that 80% of Meta is owned by the public, Amazon 72%, and, depending on share class, 60 to 80% of Alphabet. So they're already more than 50% owned by the people. But that's not what Bernie wants. He wants control by government. The word people is just a euphemism, like it always is with commies. Corey Walker posted, "Maybe I'm a cold-blooded capitalist, but you shouldn't have the right to redistribute profits that you did absolutely nothing to earn. And tossing in buzzwords like oligarch doesn't suddenly make it moral or righteous." Eduardo Germán Larrera pulled no punches. "No, you geriatric monument to incompetence. Ownership is the thing you buy or build with your own capital and at your own risk. The idiots who elected you are putty in the hands of a demagogue such as yourself, fluent in resentment. You've spent half a century being paid by the public to resent the people who fund the public sector. You are a man who built nothing, yet wants a controlling share of everything. You're a cancer on this country." Daniel Priestley was more profound than that. Quote, "Under capitalism, socialists are free to build socialism. Under socialism, capitalists aren't free to build anything. Nothing stops a group of socialists pooling their money, forming a company, and splitting every wage and every pound of profit perfectly equally, or to donate all profit to the government. It's legal. It's easy. Owning the means of production is as simple as setting up a company. Socialists are free to lead by example and demonstrate their system works. They can out-recruit, out-motivate, out-build, and out-innovate based on their ideas if they like. It would prove the philosophy works. Capitalism will happily host their experiment. The fact that nobody does this tells you a lot." I guess the only reassurance we can take from this is that his bill has basically zero chance of passing, and this is little more than a grab by Bernie for some degree of attention and relevance. So all of that makes Bernie Sanders this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire.
Well, that wraps up this Your Husband and the Others Are Alive but Unconscious, Just Like Gerald Ford edition of the Bogosity podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please go to donate.bogosity.tv for several ways to support and discord.bogosity.tv to join the discussion. Subscribe to the Discord, Patreon, or Subscribe Star, and you can listen early and ad-free. Thank you for listening. Until next time, here's a quote from Michele Boldrin. Intellectual property is in fact an intellectual monopoly that hinders rather than helps the competitive free market regime that has delivered wealth and innovation to our doorsteps. The Bogosity podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License.
Bogosity.